How's it going, everyone? I'm Ozzy from Alt Entertainment, and today we are going to be tackling the animal that is the Resident Evil 2 remake. But before we get into the review, I just wanted to remind you that if you enjoy this review, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel, as well as hit the little notification bell so that you don't miss our next video. Now that that's out of the way, let's dive into the review of Resident Evil 2. Capcom's Resident Evil series has long been one of my personal favorite franchises in gaming, and while I fully recognize that the series hasn't been perfect, I have been able to find at least some sort of enjoyment out of each title in the series I've been able to get my hands on. However, after the missteps that were Resident Evil 5 and 6, I was skeptical about one of my favorite franchises and whether they would ever return to the level of greatness it once had. Capcom had fully shifted its efforts from making survival horror Resident Evil games to a much more action-heavy epic that likened itself more and more to the awful film franchise of the same name. However, this all changed in 2017, when Capcom released Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. The game was a strong departure from the two previous games and returned the franchise back to its roots, and that is a horror game that emphasizes survival and not action. And while Resident Evil 7 sure dealt with its fair share of problems, it reinvigorated my love for the series, and I was once again excited for Resident Evil. So needless to say, my anticipation for the remake of Resident Evil 2 was at an all-time high. So the question is this game worth your time? Is it worth its $60 price tag? Is it even a good game? Well, let's dive in deeper to find out. The story of Resident Evil 2, for the most part, is largely unchanged from the original game. You play as either Leon Kennedy, a rookie cop on his first day on the job, or Claire Redfield, a young woman in search of her brother Chris, following the events of the first Resident Evil game. Both are investigating an outbreak of a mysterious virus that has turned the inhabitants of Raccoon City into flesh-eating zombies. The remake makes a few minor tweaks here and there to the story, which I do believe does a much better job than the original fleshing out its characters. Primarily Leon and Claire. I actually found myself quite invested in the game's story and its characters. However, I do believe there are still some missed opportunities that could have fleshed out its story and its characters even more. I think there are some unearned moments between Leon and Claire and what few times they do meet up after their initial encounter. They seem to talk to each other like they're already great friends and have already known each other for years, when that just isn't the case. However, for the most part, I think the changes will be welcome to hardcore fans of the original, as it teases memorable encounters from the original game, but ends up introducing them in a brand new way. So the story is good, but how does this game look? Well, this game looks gorgeous. The amount of detail the developers put into the graphics and the animations is absolutely incredible. From the way the bullets hit zombies to how your knife slices into the flesh of the dead, the amount of detail here is amazing. In my opinion, the most important piece of any horror game is immersion. Do I feel like I am there? And I'm happy to say the Resident Evil 2 remake passes this with flying colors. Unlike the original, the remake is dark, it's wet, it's disgusting. The atmosphere is so unnerving and off-putting that it's just downright claustrophobic. There are few things in this game that clam up your hands, like entering a new area that is completely pitch black with only your flashlight, and your flashlight has a limited field of vision. You don't know exactly what's around the corner, and that just adds to the intensity. This type of immersion kept me on the edge of my seat throughout my entire playthrough. The other aspect that this game really shines is the audio and the sound design. Voice acting has always been somewhat of a bugaboo in Resident Evil games, at times cheesy to the point of downright comedy, but here the voice acting is actually quite good and conveys a semblance of realism without losing its campiness that we all love about this series.
Claire, it's so nice to see you.
How are you doing? That helicopter just came out of nowhere.
I'm in one piece.
I'm guessing you don't have a key in one of those fancy pockets?
Unfortunately, no. But how are you doing?
You know, just surviving.
That's good.
The sound of the various enemies in the game is also fantastic, in particular that of the zombies themselves. I jumped in my seat on more than one occasion running through a dark area and out of nowhere hearing this snarl of a zombie. My suggestion to everyone would be to play this game in a dark room with headphones on for the most immersive experience possible. Another way this game shines in the audio realm is its soundtracks. Yes, soundtracks. You have the option to purchase the original soundtrack of the game for $2.99. The remake itself also features a new soundtrack. I used the new soundtrack on my first playthrough with Leon. This soundtrack was somewhat surprisingly great. The original soundtrack is also awesome and really adapts well to this remake. So the game looks great and it sounds great, but how does the game play? Well, the gameplay is as smooth as ever. The biggest change from the original game to the remake is, of course, the change from tank controls with the fixed camera to the over-the-shoulder third-person view that was first introduced back in Resident Evil 4. This is one of the aspects of the game that I can say is vastly improved over the remake. Though I love the old Resident Evil games, I really don't care for the tank controls and fixed camera angle. The third person fits this game perfectly and adds even more tension and atmosphere. And while the aiming isn't particularly difficult, sometimes getting an accurate shot off on a zombie is difficult. And that only heightens the tension and immersion, especially if you have more than one coming at you. Inventory and item management are also back, and as important as ever in a Resident Evil game. The pure nature of this game is stressful enough, coupled with sometimes having to make a brutal decision about getting rid of an item in your inventory, or backtracking ways to find an item box to store it. Another grueling decision that I faced was whether to kill an enemy and save myself from possibly having to deal with it later, or saving my precious ammo. The puzzles in this game, I believe, are improved from Resident Evil 7, as that was one of the few flaws I had with that game. No puzzle here is overly difficult or frustrating, but they are quite rewarding. I actually didn't have to use a guide on any of them, and that made me proud of myself. One tip that I can offer that can help you with both your puzzles and the inventory management, and this won't be new news to hardcore fans of the series, but examine each item you pick up. There are a lot of secrets hidden behind seemingly useless items. Some of these items can help you upgrade your inventory, or weapons you have, and trust me, having upgraded weapons will really help you as you progress through the game. You will spend your first few hours of the game exploring the terrifying recreation of RPD, getting familiar with the lay of the land and exploring each nook and cranny. It's important for you to get familiar with the station and all of the new mechanics, because there's one major trenchcoat wearing wrench that will be thrown into the game. Yes, I'm talking about the Tyrant, aka Mr. X. Now, Mr. X was in the original game, showing up at scripted moments as an imposing adversary. In this game, he is pretty much a complete asshole. Unlike the original, once you encounter him for the first time, he is relentless in his pursuit of you. He is unkillable, and you'll only be able to slow him down. Yet, I think it's best not to waste your ammo and resources on him unless it's absolutely necessary. His footsteps are an unsettling presence you can hear through walls, and they get louder as he gets closer to you. There are very few places in the police station that he cannot go, so he rarely feels safe. There's even one particular moment in this game where you must solve a puzzle while he is in pursuit of you. Talk about stressful. I have a love-hate relationship with Mr. X. I love his inclusion in this game and the wrinkle that his presence brings. But at the same time, fuck this guy. What a dick. Leave me alone. Now, my first playthrough with Leon took me about 8 to 9 hours to complete. But trust me, the game does not end there. Once you complete your first playthrough with Claire or Leon, you unlock a second run with whichever character you didn't use. What the second run does is gives you the perspective of the other character during the narrative. Then, once you're done with the second run, you can play another first playthrough with a character you didn't use the very first time you played. And then, repeat the process. So in total, there are 4 unique playthroughs of the story that you can do, totaling in about 35 to 40 hours of gameplay. Here's where my biggest flaw with the game exists. While I certainly like the ability to experience a second run with the other character, the game breaks some of its own rules. Some things presented to you in your second run are based off of something that you had in your first run, which I like. This is how the entire second run should operate, but you end up having to do some of the same tasks on both playthroughs with both characters. And I guess this is as good a time as any to say that I'm disappointed at the lack of moments between Leon and Claire in general. Aside from the meeting up a couple of times in the beginning and then at the very end, they don't really interact much at all. These issues aren't really that big a deal, but I just wish it was a little more consistent. But I digress. After you've completed your 4 playthroughs, there's still more to do. Capcom has released a few new DLC stories for free. Bravo, Capcom. Other developers, take note. These DLC stories include story arcs and nuggets from the main story, including an arc of a gun store owner and his daughter, an arc that I really wanted to see the end of. Each of these extra missions offer their own level of difficulty and introduce new enemies. While these stories don't offer the same depth as the main story, for free, they're a welcome addition. Listen folks, at the end of the day, this game offers more than enough content. It absolutely not only matched my expectations, but exceeded them. This is far from a perfect game, but it builds off of the excitement that Resident Evil 7 brought me, and propels me into even further excitement of the reported Resident Evil 3 Nemesis remake, and then into Resident Evil 8. I had a complete blast with this game, and I'm jonesing to be done with this video so I can go back to playing it. So if you're watching, go out and buy this game now. It's absolutely worth the price tag, and I will give it a final score of 95 out of 100. This game is fantastic. I just wanted to say thank you for watching this review. Make sure to follow us on social media. We appreciate your love and support you bring us, and there will be more coming soon.